And we are back. And let me see, make sure I get her on the phone here. On the phone with us all the way from someplace in Alabama. She represents the Alabama Policy. What's the name of that organization?
Alabama Policy Institute. And I'm calling in from Huntsville, but they are located in Birmingham.
You know, we love Huntsville. Huntsville, I was up there. They got a year ago today, next week sometime, I was looking at the nice Veterans Memorial you guys got up there. I mean, going to Huntsville is like being in another state. You know, it's
wonderful.
It really is.
Yeah, I was there last weekend visiting some friends. Great city.
Really is. But now you caught my eye, and you can ask anybody, really do I read all these doggone op-eds and all that stuff? But I found one that you wrote that kind of interests me, it's about the Alabama accountability. And from my reading, you were not a fan of this particular act. Does that say what I think what you meant to say, or is that my right? Well, you know what I mean.
Sure. Well, close. Actually, I am a big fan of the Alabama Accountability Act. I'm just not a big fan of what's happening right now in our state with the local school board. So let me just kind of give a synopsis here. So local school boards representing 3 of the state's largest public school systems. So we're talking about Montgomery County, Mobile, Baldwin, and Montgomery counties. They have recently passed resolutions calling for a repeal.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the landmark tax credit scholarships that helps low-income families go to schools of their choice, be that an independent school, a private school, a public school. It helps them transfer out of a failing school or one that they deem isn't right for their family.
What, in your definition, can somebody define to me, what a failing school is?
Sure. So part of the Alabama Accountability Act, when it was established in 2013, they said, hey, we're going to have to measure, what is a failing school? And they decided that they would set that as the lowest 6% of test scores in the state. So those schools that fall into the lowest 6%, they get a failing grade. But, what does that mean about, if you're in the lowest 8%?
Well,
you're a B grade. But, as a family, let's say you have children in a school and you're saying, wow, my kid is not thriving here. Maybe they're being bullied. Maybe they are not getting a great education at this school. Unless you are a higher income family, you don't have much of a choice. You're just stuck there. So what this was created to do was to say, okay, if you meet the standards of, 100% of the folks who applied for this meet the eligibility requirement to receive free or reduced price lunches. So if you meet that eligibility requirement, we are going to allow a certain number to, apply and go to a different school. And it's made a huge difference for folks. And so what I am not a fan of are these local school boards coming in and saying, all right, we don't want this anymore. This is taking money away from us. And the huge point that I would love to get across is that the Education Trust Fund is enormous. It's the largest operating fund of the state. So we're talking about like $6.7 billion. When you think about the scholarship program, what percentage that accounts for, it's one half of 1% of that Education Trust Fund. So we're talking about a minuscule amount of money, but the way you would hear local school boards talk about it, it sounds like it's just taking tons and tons of money away from what they're calling their cash-strapped systems.
Let me, first of all, I think, and again, I'm not an education expert, not even when I was in school, but I do have a little common sense left. So I'm wondering, you realize that if you did something wrong in your position that you hold at work, that they wouldn't get rid of the work, they'd get rid of you. So here's my question. We seem to think by moving kids from one bad place to another, from one bad place, makes the place better. Why don't we, and maybe you can check all this, if I work at McDonald's and I'm the manager, and the McDonald's are just going down the tube, they don't get rid of the employees and build a new McDonald's. They get a new manager. Why is it that we will not move the grown-ups as opposed to moving the students? Schools don't fail anybody.
I guess when you think about what happened with the Montgomery School Board, though, I guess the adults have been moved on their way. I believe the entire board is. Well,
listen. That all that is facade. Because if you have the same rules, if you have the same policies, what difference does it make who the policymakers are?
Well, and you bring up a great point, and that's the point of folks who are proponents of the Alabama Accountability Act. They say, you know what? Let's just call this research and development if we have to. We are trying to do something different. We're seeing if this works. Let's give scholarships to kids. Let's let them go to a different school. You know, most of them are coming from schools that their families are saying this is not our first choice by any means. Our kids aren't doing well. Maybe it's a failing school. Maybe it's just a school that is a D or a C. And let me say, the scholarships go first to children in failing schools. So 100% of the kids, like I said, meet that eligibility requirement to receive free or reduced price lunches. Then the priority goes to kids who are in failing schools. And then if there's money left over, that rolls on to other kids. But, you bring up a great point. It's like, let's try something new. Can we all just say, look, this hasn't been working. Business as usual is not producing the education that we want in our state. Let's just try something else.
Well, and I'm just, something that perplexed me. We, when the No Child Left Behind thing came out, I think it was George Bush who originally said that, it is, what was his famous quote about low expectation is
the soft bigotry of low expectations.
The soft bigotry of low expectations. Mm-hmm. If I was playing football for Prattville High or for the Hoover Tigers or whatever they are, and the coach said, in order to make these people the best they can be, these are the things which we are going to initiate, nobody would complain. Can you please tell me why it is that low expectations seem to be the standard of most public schools in urban America?
Well, I think there's a quote from a guy named Ryan Cantrell who helped to craft this scholarship program, some of the language in it years ago. Mm-hmm. And what he said, I think, just sums it up so much. He said, we're talking about, and this is about these scholarships, we're talking about families who absolutely had no other option. He said, for the life of me, I don't understand how an elected official could consciously vote to take that away from a low-income child. It boggles the mind. And he went on to say that the heart of the problem is that opponents of the scholarship program are primarily concerned with the public education system itself, not the students it was established to serve. And that's where I think the low standards come in, is where we say, you know what, the adults in the room think we're doing the best we can. Give us more money, give us grace, whatever. We're doing the best we can, when the parents are saying, you know what, that best doesn't seem to be good enough for my child. My child is coming through the system, and the system is failing my child. I'm low income. I don't have another choice. Here's a lifeline, and I'm going to take that lifeline. I mean, when we talk to parents who are receiving these scholarships for their kids, it is making a huge difference for them.
But the only thing that but great. Let me ask a question, Rachel. The only thing that is different between leaving a school that's failing and going to a school, quote unquote, that is succeeding is expectations. That's it. I don't ever know a school that got more money that did solely better because they got more money. We can take kids in rural America right now to go to a school, and most of the time, that school does pretty good. Mm-hmm. So why is it that money, all of a sudden, I'm 61. They did not spend the money on kids, per capita kids, when I was coming to school, that they're spending now. And we seem to do all right. We got computers, cars that almost drive themselves. We got all kind of technology, the phone, the light bulb, and all these things. And some reason we think that giving people the access to money to go someplace else all of a sudden solves all of our problems. But it doesn't.
Well, and when you bring up the funding issue, some of the critics say this is taking money away from public school systems, but let's just look at the numbers. So in Montgomery's funding has increased by 5%, while its overall student population decreased by more than 7%, and I'm talking about since 2014. In Mobile, their share of funding increased by nearly 8% since 2014. Their enrollment has shrunk by 6%. Baldwin's share of state, I'm talking about systems that have voted resolutions to end.
Right, I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, their money has increased by 22.5%. So the money is going up, and like you said, are the standards going up with them?
Okay, now let's talk about Montgomery's 5%. Now, I got to tell you, if my rent's $500 a month, and for the last 40 years, you've given me $400 a month, then you've already got me, and which is in Montgomery, where you got 10% millage, so it's 10 mills. So it seemed to me that Montgomery schools have never been funded, and so now you give them a little bit more money and say, well, now we got 5%, we're spending 5% more. Well, that's not even getting you to where you need to be, even though they gave you 5% more. They have never funded Montgomery schools appropriately or adequately.
Well, whether that's true or not, that has nothing to do with the Accountability Act, though.
No, but they're saying that it's taking money from the school. She's telling me that Montgomery has gotten 5%, more money, but they never funded them to begin with, Rachel. So how do you go from? So now we like plus negative?
Well, you know what I would like to know an answer to. I've heard some say that the amount of discretionary money that local schools can use, that is what's limited. So I wonder if that's part of the problem, is that local schools don't have as much ability to take the money that they do have and use that money that, some of it must be allocated to.
Now that's what, right.
What's that pot? What's that pot that they have control over? And I think, local control is the better way.
Yeah. Now, they did tell me.
If they have this budget and they can only control a certain portion of it, maybe we increase that.
Right. We did that. I have been told that a lot of the money in the school budget is earmarked. It can only be used. I mean, you can have $2 million sitting over there not being used, but since it's only earmarked for lunches or books or whatever, they can't use it for anything else. And I find that to be, nonsensical, to say the least. But that's what a lot of them are saying. Yeah, you can have the money, but you can't use it.
Right. And I think we should look at that. I mean, if you are in a certain city, you know best where that money should go within your system. So let's give more local control to these systems and to these school boards.
Well, and that'll solve a lot of that waste just organically, because somebody that, is living way out in the boonies, that's running a small county school, they are a better judge of where that money needs to go than some bureaucrat in Montgomery that's never been to that school.
Exactly.
So all in all then, and maybe I was reading your article wrong, you are for the Accountability Act, but you just don't like the way we're treating it, or Montgomery saying, okay, we don't like this thing because it's taking money from schools, and they're already working in a negative. So what's your solution then, or what do you recommend?
Sure. And I think anybody who's been following the act since it came into being says, you know what, there's problems with this. It was passed in a way that perhaps we didn't like. There's lots to talk about within the Alabama Accountability Act, that maybe there's some improvement there that can happen. I think all that's fine. Let's talk about those issues. But what I don't like, well, let me give you an example. I'll tell you what brought this topic up to me was when Alabama Board of Education member Ella Bell, which I'm sure you know well from Montgomery there, said in a work session that the tax credit scholarship program was part of a process to, quote, destroy a whole race of people. And I think, I was watching the video of that work session, and I think people who support the Alabama Accountability Act were taken a little bit back by that, to say the least, because reporting out of AL.com shows that more than 80% of the parents who received scholarships last year from the two largest providers are minorities. And so, when she was describing that this program is hurting what she described as a whole race of people, I felt like, this needs to be looked into a little bit. Who is this helping? And I talked to a bunch of parents. One of them, Delphine Wilson of Montgomery, she uses the scholarships to send her children to private school. Anyway, she said that at the Montgomery County School Board meeting where they approved that resolution demanding the repeal, her kids took a knee in front of the board, basically out of protest, saying, "Please don't take our scholarships away."
So we're taking knees now, huh? Okay,
yeah,
then.
taking a knee. But afterward, they approved the resolution demanding a repeal. Her daughter was weeping after the meeting, afraid she'd lose her scholarship. Her son was saying, "Can we please leave Alabama?" There are real people benefiting from it. It's not very many people. It's less than 4,000 students across the state who are receiving scholarships. But
and that's a lot of money.
That's what gets me is when we start talking about the systems and not those individual students moving through those schools who this is their life.
We saw actually something very similar.
Yeah.
We saw something very similar actually happen in Louisiana where we had the school voucher program, and once that was done away with, the students that it actually impacted the most were minority students, mostly with low incomes.
That's right.
Tell me again how big the budget is for this Accountability Act.
Okay, so there's it's a tax credit program.
Right.
So the cap is at $30 million, which is 0.5% of, let's just say last, fiscal year 2018, the Education Trust Fund was $6.75 billion. So this is small.
So let me ask you, if we use that money, raise the expectation of all of our schools and use that money to divide up between those areas, because can anybody tell me, and maybe I'm the only one to see this, there's only one difference between one school to another. There's only one difference. And we all know what that difference is. And it's the staff that is employed by the school boards or by the superintendents. That's the only difference, because people expect things if you show up in their classroom, and some people don't. So why don't we just give some raises to some good teachers and get rid of the bad wood?
Well, I will be the first to say that teachers are heroes. My mother was a teacher. I believe that we should compensate them and compensate them very well. I don't think teachers make enough money, but are we sure that money would go to teachers, or would it get sucked up in administrative costs and more bureaucracy? I mean, again, we're talking about such a tiny percentage, Kevin. If we just allocate that across all the schools in the state, would we see any improvement, or is it worth just saying, let's just see what happens with this? Let's see what happens in the lives of these kids who are in those schools right now and would like a different option than being in a failing school that's under state intervention.
But the word failing school is an oxymoron, because schools don't fail. People do.
But Kevin, you have to say that there are certain that from one school to another, it's not apples.
It's people, right? It's people. It's not the building.
Absolutely.
So why don't we get rid of the bad people and put good people in? Would you agree, theoretically, if we took the teachers that teach in the good schools, put them in the quote unquote failing schools, I would tell you we would have the same result. It's not the school, but we put a burden on parents to get them the transportation and all this stuff to get them to another school, when the school that they have to leave is within their neighborhood. Why don't we just put good people in the schools?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, you just said that we put the burden on these folks to get them to another school, but it's not. I mean, people who reach out to get a scholarship they're hustling. They're not. There's not a burden being put on them. They are reaching out and looking for a lifeline, and that's what they see this as. They don't see it as a burden. They say, "I'm happy to drive my child to another."
That's why they got gas in their car. That's true. But some, I know some that it has become somewhat of a burden to move to go way across town to another school. Again, nobody's dealt with my issue. Why don't we take the good teachers and put them in the bad schools?
Well, you might have to take that up with the teachers union.
Well,
I'm sure there are many people who would like to see standards and would like to be able to have bad teachers be fired or whatever, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, and furthermore, on
teacher reform.
On top of that, Kevin, you have to keep in mind that teachers are individuals and they may not want to move to a different city.
They work for us. They work for they need to go where we ask them to go.
But it's not like the Army where you can just station somebody somewhere else. Well, now, maybe you would prefer that method, but I'm just saying that's not how it works right now.
Well, that would be all right with me. Well, okay. I just want some confirmation on this one last thing before I let you go. You will agree that schools don't fail, people do.
I do agree with that. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I wanted to get across. But yet still, we take the easy way out and tell the kids you can go someplace else. And
I don't know if it's the easy way.
Yeah, well, but then here's what we're telling. We're telling the kids that are left behind who don't get the scholarship, we're telling them, well, sorry about that. You're just stuck where you are. And now these kids get a chance to go someplace else where they're better personnel.
Let me say this real quick, Kevin. What you just brought up is important. Introducing a little bit of competition into the system helps those schools, I believe.
Yeah.
I believe giving an option for scholarships means those other schools are going to be working harder to actually reform. That's my hope and prayer.
Well, you've been here a minute. I've been here a couple of minutes. Theoretically, that sounds great, but it hadn't seemed to happen because we're still taking kids out of quote unquote failing schools, putting them someplace else. But the kids who are the kids who don't get the lottery, so we're telling them, sorry about that.
Well, how about this, though, Kevin? Wouldn't the person that's left behind, the person that's the principal or the people that are the teachers that are left over, wouldn't they be motivated to get better at that point?
But somehow, if you're still getting the same check, it just doesn't bother you.
But should we take away those scholarships from the kids who do get out just because everybody doesn't, or should we raise that cap so more people can?
I'm gonna have to cogitate on that one. Again, I'm not an education expert, but I do know that if something is taken away, that leaves something behind.
That's true.
So
I think that's a fair point, but I do think it's also fair to say you don't
Rachel,
want to spread the misery.
If you're ever in Montgomery, come on down and see us in the studio.
Oh, I would love to. Absolutely. I sure appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, okay. I guess that's
I thought that was enlightening.
It is what it is. But you can't say you give Montgomery 5% more money when you're never giving them enough money to begin with.
And that wasn't her point. Her point was that the Montgomery County School Board is against this particular act and said that it's going to decrease our funding when actually it didn't. That's all she was saying.
But again, if I'm Montgomery School Board and I'm the new members, I'm saying hell with doing this. Make all of our schools equal. Make all of our schools the best they can be. And I'm hoping that's what I'm hoping out of this new wave of education experts, quote unquote. Make it all good. Okay. Make even our worst better than others. Rigsby said, if your best can be better, then it's not good enough. So can we make it better? We'll be back.
WSFA 12 News Update on News Radio 1440.
Good morning. I'm Tanya Terry in the newsroom. Montgomery Fire and Rescue responded to a house fire overnight. Our WSFA 12 news crew found the scene at the intersection of Swanee Drive and Cahaba Drive in West Montgomery. No word on any injuries or the full extent of the damage. Montgomery Fire and Rescue say it was nothing short of a miracle that no one was injured when a car crashed into the side of a home Sunday morning. It happened at the intersection of Haynes Lane and Perry Hill Road. The car left the roadway and crashed into the side of the home. We spoke to one of the residents who said she's thankful no one was hurt. State troopers are stepping up patrols this holiday travel season with their annual operation called Arrive Alive. Right now through New Year's Eve, all state troopers will be patrolling Alabama's highways. And the two-night season finale for NBC's The Voice begins tonight. 4 singers remain in the hunt for the show's season 15 crown, including Alabama country singer Kirk J. The Voice airs tonight at 7 on WSFA 12 News. That's the news for now.
Mark Levin, weekday evenings beginning at 5 p.m. on News Radio 1440, WLWI AM Montgomery, a cumulative